Welcome in, everyone, to the Bend, Oregon Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Rob Eggers, principal broker here at Duke Warner Realty. Over 20 years experience selling real estate here in Bend. I am joined by my business partner, Katrina Swisher, also 20 years experience selling real estate here in Bend. Katrina, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, here we are, start of a new year once again.
We're back, little by little.
Little by little, piece by piece. You know, the new year, I love this time of year because I think it's a great time just for, hope for the future, setting goals, aspirations, and also just a time of reflection too. And that's kind of the theme of our podcast today is just reflecting on 2023 and what that real estate market was like and all that happened. And it was a year. It was quite a year. So Katrina, I'll put you on the spot. If you had to pick one word to describe 2023 as a real estate market, what would it be?
Insecure.
Insecure. Really? Okay, why would it be insecure?
Well, I mean, I feel like that's how most people felt for the year.
Good point. Like buyers and sellers.
Very unsure of the year.
Yeah.
Not a lot of confidence either way.
Yeah. Good word. I like that. Yeah, it's really true. I think with all the different factors, you didn't have a lot of confidence from sellers. You didn't have a lot of confidence from buyers either.
And we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, we really couldn't predict or get a grasp of the year. So I think that led to our own insecurities of what was going to happen next.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great word for it. The word that kind of came to my mind was tumultuous. Tumultuous? How do you say that?
Tumultuous.
You know what? Well done. I couldn't get that out of my mouth. That word, that's what came to my mind. And just because it was turbulent, it was like things were kind of hopping in the spring and going well. And then all of a sudden it just kind of took a dive there mid-year and really faded at the end of the year. So let's look back a little bit and just kind of recap the year, because I think it's important to look at the year because it could also tell us about the future too. It could tell us about, maybe what the real estate market might do this year coming up. So just recapping, how would you describe, say, the spring and going into the start of the year a year ago?
I mean, I feel like the start of the year still felt pretty normal, whatever normal might be coming out of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But things were still moving pretty quickly. We were positive, being able to list homes and have them sell fairly quickly. Things were starting to shift. We could feel that slightly. I mean, interest rates were higher than they had been, but there was still enough activity going on to keep moving through the spring. I think we were still seeing multiple offers, full price offers, overall fairly strong start to the year.
Yeah, just looking here at Mortgage News Daily, the interest rates at the beginning of the year in January were as low as 6.2. So they, started pretty low, relatively speaking. And I remember the first of last year, we were pretty busy. And we thought, wow, this is, what looks like it could be shaping up to be a really busy spring. So as we moved into this, the spring, I think it was, would you call it a normal spring market last year?
I feel like it was for the
normal,
I take that back.
Excluding like the COVID years that were really crazy.
Right. I feel like it was not as busy as our springs typically are. Yeah. I feel like we were steady.
A little tempered.
Yes. Typically we are going nuts in the spring.
Yeah.
Juggling all sorts of balls at one time. And last spring, I mean, it was steady, which felt good and wasn't too scary at the time, but not as busy as past springs had been.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. It was definitely it was the busiest time of the whole year.
It was.
But but it wasn't as busy as like it usually is. So, but then kind of something happened in the summertime. And, usually we do take a bit of a dip in the summer months. Like everyone kind of thinks, oh, summer's the best time to sell. But in Bend, it's really the spring is the best time. I think so much happens in the summer, like, graduations, people go on vacations, they go camping, people come to visit here. Real estate kind of takes a back burner because there's so much happening in Bend. It's such a fun town, so many things going on, that I think real estate kind of takes a lull. But this year, it like kind of got bonked in the head.
Yeah.
So what would you describe as like what happened, say, midsummer?
I mean, it was dead as far as I was concerned. There was just not a lot going on anywhere. Interest rates continued to climb. So I think that just really shut everything down. And we already, like you said, have a pause in the summer. And with that, I think everyone, buyers and sellers, took a big pause to just wait it out and see what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I did have a couple listings come on, and unfortunately they were a little late to the game. We do try and get people to list earlier in the year.
Yep.
And those conversations started to happen in May, and they weren't ready to list till July, and it was rough timing.
Timing's everything, in so many facets of life, but it really does affect real estate a lot. I mean, if there's just X number of buyers that are going to purchase and the majority of them make their purchase in the spring, you've just got a smaller amount of buyers left.
Yeah, for sure. And especially last year, once interest rates hit 7, which they started to do in the summertime. At that point, you didn't really have buyers wanting to jump into the market. And inventory was so low because sellers were also pausing because they weren't sure what to do.
Yeah. That
we just had this bit of a tug of war with inventory. And so at least my personal experience with buyers at that time they weren't buying because there wasn't anything good to buy.
Yeah.
It was kind of the bottom of the barrel pickings.
Right.
And so I had buyers just completely put it on the back burner because they were disappointed in the inventory.
Yeah. So end of June, the interest rates really climbed. It went from, in June, it was like 6.7. And then by the time we hit July, it was 7.2. So and that was like a new threshold. Like we hadn't hit 7s forever.
Yeah.
Like when we started in real estate in 2001, interest rates were in the 7s. And then it dropped into the 6s and really never looked back, just kept going down and down and down. So this is the first time since we started our career that we saw 7%.
Yeah.
And I think that number, lucky number 7, wasn't lucky for buyers. They just said no.
No, that was the threshold that I think people completely went, whoa.
Yeah.
Wait a second. We're now over 7. I think people could deal with the 6s. They were still able to buy down into the 5s potentially. But at that point, it was getting scary and for buyers. But not only that, they were getting priced out. They could no longer afford what they thought they could. Yeah. And people weren't ready to adjust their expectations or expand their searches in ways they just stopped.
Yeah, absolutely. That 7 was a threshold that buyers didn't want. And you alluded to it earlier. Then sellers started to pull back going, okay, we bought our house and I've got a 3% mortgage rate. So if I buy another one, I'm going to have to do 7. And they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't sell right now. So they just locked up and decided, okay, I'm not going to list. So the inventory got lower, but then sales dropped. So it was a really weird dynamic because you had sales dropping, but also inventory dropping too. And usually when sales drop, the inventory piles up.
Exactly.
It did a really weird thing. They both dropped because of interest rates, which is super unusual. So I don't know. It was a crazy time. And then we thought it was bad then, but it got even worse at that point.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so at that point, we were looking, it bounced around the mid sevens all the way through the end of summer into August. By August 21st, it's showing 7.5%. And then once we hit October, it did the big jump into the eights. So that was like officially killing the market.
Mm-hmm.
Like one last bullet in the
Yeah.
real estate market right there. If it wasn't dead before, we're going to make sure it's definitely dead right now. And it did. It worked, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think any buyers who were still somewhat active or intended to be active for the summer, hoping to buy, it killed them at that point. I personally experienced it multiple times on one transaction or one home sale where I had the listing and I had 3 different sales fall through because of buyer financing.
Ouch.
All because of interest rate.
Wow.
And just their qualifications changing. They didn't lock their rate quick enough, and the rate was moving that quickly that overnight they could be priced out.
Wow.
And they were freaking out and just bailing left and right, just jumping ship.
Yeah.
And these deals were falling apart, and the buyers were like, we're out of the market until things change.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think I probably wasn't the only one experiencing that. I was
No.
hearing those stories from a lot of other agents as well. And it was just kind of the situation we were in, I think, from August till, well, the rest of the year, really.
Yeah.
Until, I mean, the only solution at that point as we got into like October was to really adjust prices on any current listings, any listings that were left over from the summer, to a point that made up for their interest rate to get buyers in.
Yeah.
And any new listings coming on, I feel like were really priced accordingly to be able to sell at that point. Because it was not a time of the market to attempt a higher price.
Yeah. Yeah. Having 3 transactions fail is brutal.
It was brutal.
I mean, it's bad when you have one fail. That's hard for people.
Yeah.
Transaction fails. You have to start over. It's really bad when you have to do it twice. It's almost catastrophic when you have 3 times.
Yeah.
How was your seller doing?
Oh, I mean, they are amazing people. And so I got really lucky because that wouldn't be the situation always.
Yeah.
And, they were just very hurt and sad and upset and stressed. But we got through it together and we did get it sold, and we ended up with a higher sales price than we would have on one of those previous transactions.
Oh, that's good.
So it did work out, but it was very
lining.
trying and took a lot of patience and teamwork and communication to get through it. But they did not want my phone calls.
I bet.
We had a joke at the end, like if their phone rang and it wasn't me texting or emailing, they were like, oh no, please don't call us ever.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like when you start to get hit a couple times by a certain phone number or person on the phone. It's like you don't want that phone number to come through.
I was afraid for phone calls from other agents.
Right.
If I had a pending deal, I was like, don't call me. Why are you calling me?
Right.
This
and
has
as soon
got
as
to
you
be
do,
bad
you're
news.
like, and you see the number pop up on your phone, and your first response is, "Oh no!
Oh no!"
Before you even have the conversation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah,
feeling.
your heart just drops. You're like, oh no, what is it?
Right.
I mean, I think that's the insecurity we had because buyers were feeling it, agents were feeling it, sellers were feeling it. Nobody was confident in any part of the transaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really true. And just listings tend, to just sit. And the problem too is it's just a slow time of year anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of had this major double whammy of the fall, Thanksgiving, holidays coming up, but also interest rates being high. And it just, whatever little activities usually there in the fall was just kind of quenched by that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, I think in some ways we saw some opportunity for buyers start to pick up towards the end of the year. I mean, I experienced that a little bit. So there were some closings towards the end of the year, just where the prices finally corrected enough, and there were some good deals to be had.
Yeah.
So I think some buyers, were willing to jump in at that point once the prices had changed from where they were earlier in the summer. But still, for the most part, statistically, our numbers were really low.
Yeah. And typically, like I said, once you get to November, Thanksgiving, the real estate market kind of stops anyway. So everyone kind of puts it on the back burner. Nothing much happens. But what's interesting during that time where the real estate market was hibernation, rates did an incredible thing. They just dropped. So like if you look at November 13th, we were at 7.6 for 30-year fixed. And that's mid-November. So we had a month and a half left in the year. From there to December 14th, 1 month later, they were 6.2. So you're dropping a whole point in 30 days.
But somewhere in between there, they hit over 8.
No, they had already been to 8. They were
Was that
8.
earlier in November?
Yeah, they were earlier
Okay. And then it
in November. Yeah, they were in October. They were at 8, and it kind of carried through, and then it kind of slowly dropped down. And like I said, once you get to November, Thanksgiving time anyway, the real estate market's dead. So we're like, well, nothing's happening anyway. But then while we were, asleep in the market, then the rates really dropped a lot. But nothing really happened too much because of the time of year.
Right. Which is always quiet. Like you said, in December, it's always quiet. I think people aren't really paying as much attention. There were no listings on the market to buy.
No one wants to list during, Christmas.
Right.
So the inventory remained really low. And then, so we kind of bounced around in the 6s there for a lot of December. And then that's kind of where we're at today, finishing the year. Well, let's see. Right now, we're at 6.8 today, and this is January 17th. So, but even at the first of the year, it was right around 6.7. So we're a point higher, one tenth higher than what we were a month ago. Yeah. So it's we're back in the 6s, which is a relief.
A huge relief, and nice to start the year that way, because I think it's giving some confidence to buyers and sellers for the year to start off going in the right direction, and under that 7 mark makes a big difference mentally for us. Just as when we price something at $699 versus $700, it's all just a bit of a mental thing. But being under 7 makes a big difference for everybody. So
it really,
I think it's a positive start to the new year.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, before we go any farther, I'm going to mention the sponsor of our show, which is Duke Warner Realty. Duke Warner Realty is a premier real estate firm here in Bend that was established in 1967 by Duke and Kitty Warner and is still family-owned and operated to this very day. Duke Warner Realty has served thousands and thousands of customers throughout Central Oregon over the last 55 years, and the brokerage not only features Bend's best real estate agents, but also the most experienced, with the average agent at Duke Warner having 15 years of real estate experience. So if you want your next real estate transaction done right with honesty and integrity, give Duke Warner Realty a call today at 541-382-8262 or visit them online at dukewarner.com. All right, Katrina. Well, I think that's a pretty good summary for the year 2023, except one thing we didn't really talk about, which was pricing. We had a major milestone happen in 2023. You want to share what that is?
Our median home price hit its highest ever that we have on record in July.
Yep.
We were at $800 for the median home price.
Yeah, $800,000 for the median. That is just that's mind blowing.
Yes,
it's a huge milestone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're you're almost getting to where it's like, wow, your median home price is almost $1 million. That will probably happen someday in Bend. That's a scary thought.
I think it will.
It probably will eventually.
I think we're headed that direction, obviously, but
yeah. But I think that's a big milestone. But I think one thing that it might be a little misleading with that is that with interest rates, we hit that in July. For one, July is when the interest rates really started to go high. But these sales are kind of reflective of what's happening in the spring because you have like a 30 to say 45-day escrow. I think the interest rates were already kind of getting higher at that point. So the market shifted a bit, like lower end homes were selling and more higher end homes were selling. So the median shifted a little bit to reflect higher numbers.
Yeah, I think the buyers under 800 were greatly affected by the interest rates, and the buyers over 800 aren't as affected, or they're cash buyers. But it didn't make as big of a difference to them. Yeah. So not only was there less inventory under 800, I think just less buyer activity as well.
Yeah. And the other thing we didn't really talk about was inflation, which is a really important factor because I think inflation is really what drove the interest rates up so high. I think that's the government's answer to, okay, how do we get inflation to come down? Let's raise the interest rates, slow buying down in every capacity so pricing can come down. Mm-hmm. And that's why we saw just that extreme jump from mid 6s to 7s to mid 7s to then 8. They just wanted to, I think, slow a lot of the different industries down. It certainly had an effect on our market.
For sure.
And real estate is such a trickle down thing too. Like when homes aren't selling, it affects so many industries. Like, people aren't buying towels or blinds or, furniture. There's so many things that get affected when home sales slow down or drop. And then, those probably like furniture stores probably have a lot more inventory now than they did, a couple of years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think people were pulling back in all areas
Yep.
of spending.
Yep. Pulling back in areas of spending. So I think that's what the goal was. And I think it's obviously come down a lot, and the rates have come down a lot in the last month and a half. So the government is looking at things going, okay, maybe inflation is not bad, solve some of that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the numbers are going in the right direction, which as inflation comes down, then we're seeing the interest rates follow. So that's good news for us.
Yeah.
Looking into this next year.
Yeah, definitely. So I think on our next podcast, Katrina and I are going to talk about just the predictions for 2024 and kind of what we see happening this year. If we think 2024 is a good year to buy, if it's a good year to sell, we'll look at all of that. But I think it's important to really kind of summarize 2023, like we said, just to really get an understanding of what we went through and what's more recently happened so we can look at the future.
And hope that it's not as tumultuous.
Yes, tumultuous. I see. I still can't say it. That is awesome.
Oh, yeah, I think you said it that time.
Oh, did I? Okay, good. One last plug for us. Even though it was a tough year, we still won a top award at Duke Warner Realty for one of the top producing teams of 2. So we still did well.
We did.
A lot of that is thanks to you guys, thanks to your referrals, thanks to our past clients who have supported us throughout the years. We greatly appreciate it. And of course, we'd love to help anyone you guys know during 2024 as well. So just keep that in mind, and we want to thank you guys for that. So I think with that, we're pretty much done unless you have anything else you want to say as a recap.
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah, ready to move on.
Yeah, ready to move on and looking forward to a great new year. So, all right, well, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up and follow the show on whatever podcast platform you're watching. We look forward to seeing you guys next time. Take care.